The coffee machine hissed softly behind the counter. The smell of slow-cooked beef stew and warm peach pie still filled Copper Lantern Diner during the middle of the lunch rush. Outside the dusty windows, 18-wheelers rolled along Highway 50 beneath the pale Nevada sun, carrying heat and desert wind through the small town of Ely. Then the front door opened. 3 men walked in. Nobody inside the diner looked at them for very long. An older truck driver quietly kept cutting into his meatloaf near the window booth. A couple sitting beside the pie counter stopped talking and stared down at their coffee cups instead. Somewhere near the kitchen pass-through, silverware clinked softly against a plate before the sound disappeared completely, because everybody in Ely knew it was smarter not to get involved with men connected to Redstone Transit Group. One of them carried a folder tucked beneath his arm. "You should sign it this time, Nora." Nora Bennett didn't answer. She stayed behind the pie counter her parents had built nearly 30 years earlier, one hand resting against the worn wood near the register, while steam drifted slowly from a tray of fresh peach pie beside her. The man smiled faintly. Then he slammed the tray onto the floor. The metal pan crashed hard against the tile, scattering warm peaches and broken crust across the diner. Another man grabbed Nora by the wrist and pulled her away from the counter in front of everybody. Still nobody moved. Then came the sound of a German shepherd barking outside. Deep, violent, close enough to shake the silence inside the diner. Heads turned toward the parking lot. A dust-covered pickup had just stopped beside the old neon sign out front. The driver stepped out wearing a faded navy jacket, and beside him stood a black and tan military K9 with its ears locked forward toward the diner windows. Near the entrance, an older customer slowly lowered his fork. "Jesus, Cal Vance is back. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from tonight. And if stories about loyalty, family, and old American highways mean something to you, consider subscribing." Now, the trouble at Copper Lantern Diner started long before Cal Vance came home. By 5:40 every morning, the Copper Lantern Diner already sounded awake. The old coffee machine hissed behind the counter with a tired rhythm, the kind of sound that had lived in the walls for so long it felt less like machinery and more like breathing. Outside, Highway 50 stretched pale and empty beneath the Nevada sky, with desert dust clinging to the diner windows and the first long-haul trucks rolling past before the sun had fully cleared the low hills east of Ely. Nora Bennett unlocked the front door alone. She was 29, though the past year had placed a quieter age around her eyes. Her dark blonde hair was tied back in a loose knot that never stayed neat through breakfast service, and her blue work shirt carried a faint dusting of flour near the cuffs before the day even started. She moved carefully through the diner, not slowly, but with the practiced economy of someone who had too much to do and nobody coming in to help. The first thing she did was turn on the neon sign. It buzzed twice before the copper lantern shape outside the window flickered to life, glowing unevenly against the morning gray. Her father used to tap the metal frame with 2 fingers and say a sign only needed patience, the same as people. Nora had stopped tapping it after the funeral, though some mornings her hand still lifted halfway before she caught herself. Old habits were cruel that way. Behind the counter, she pulled 3 coffee mugs from the shelf. She set them in a row beside the machine, then stood there for a moment, staring at them as steam began curling from the glass pot. 1 mug for her father, black coffee with no sugar. 1 for her mother, half coffee and too much cream. 1 for herself, usually forgotten until it went cold near the register. Nora took 2 mugs back and placed them on the shelf. The diner was small enough that a person could see nearly all of it from the counter. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, their seams patched with careful strips of matching tape. A few stools sat along the counter, each one slightly worn down, where elbows and work jackets had rested for years. Near the kitchen pass-through, her father's old canvas jacket still hung from a hook, its sleeves faded at the elbows, its left pocket sagging from the tire gauge he used to carry there. Nora had washed everything else. She had not washed that jacket. In the kitchen, the morning batch of peach pies waited under a towel near the oven. The recipe card lay beside them, written in her mother's slanted handwriting, with flour still caught along one corner and a brown sugar stain shaped like a thumbprint near the word cinnamon. People had driven out of their way for those pies for nearly 30 years. Truckers mostly, but sometimes ranch hands, road crews, retired couples heading west with paper maps folded in the glove box. Her mother always said peach pie tasted best when the fruit had been given time to soften. Nora used canned peaches in winter and fresh ones when she could afford them. Nobody complained. By 7, the first regular came in, a retired county road worker named Walt Haskins, who always sat near the window and ordered 2 eggs over medium, even though Nora no longer needed to ask. He had known her parents since before Nora was born, but he rarely spoke about them directly. He took off his cap when he passed the framed photograph near the register, then pretended he had only been fixing his hair. "Morning," he said. "Morning, Walt. You sleep any?" Nora poured his coffee. "Enough." He looked at her for a second too long, then let it go. Kindness in small towns often arrived disguised as silence. More customers came slowly after that. 2 truck drivers on their way toward Utah. A woman from the post office picking up a slice of pie for later. An older couple who split biscuits and gravy every Thursday because they said full portions were for young people and fools. The place filled just enough to feel alive, though not enough to cover what Nora owed. The bills were stacked in a metal tray beneath the register. She knew the order without looking. Power company, insurance, flour supplier, repair estimate for the walk-in cooler, a notice from the county health office about a second inspection in 3 months, even though the last inspector had found nothing worse than a cracked rubber mat behind the grill. The trouble had started politely. First came the letters from Redstone Transit Group, printed on thick paper, with the kind of language that tried to sound helpful while measuring the value of surrender. Their proposed highway logistics hub would bring jobs, development, and long-term growth to the corridor outside Ely. Copper Lantern sat near the access road they wanted. Redstone called it a fair acquisition opportunity. Nora called it selling her parents twice. After the letters came the men. They were never loud at first. They ordered coffee, left no tip, and asked whether she had thought about the offer. They mentioned how hard it was to run a diner alone, how expensive repairs could get, how dangerous old roads became when people refused to move with the times. One of them once smiled at the photo of her parents and said they probably would have wanted her to be practical. Nora had thrown his coffee away after he left. Then the pressure changed shape. A produce delivery failed to arrive, and the supplier claimed there had been confusion with the account. 2 truckers told her somebody at the gas station had warned them the diner might be unsafe to eat in. One Friday night, 3 one-star reviews appeared online within 20 minutes, all saying nearly the same thing, all from accounts that had never reviewed another place before. The diner got quieter after that. Not empty, just quieter. Nora learned how to stretch beef stew across one more day than she should have. She learned which light bulb near the hallway could stay burned out until the following week. She learned to smile at customers while calculating whether she could pay the pie ingredient bill before the check bounced. What she never learned was how to stop listening for her parents. Her father had died last year on a rain-slick mountain road with her mother beside him. Coming back from Reno after a meeting Nora still knew almost nothing about. The official words had been simple enough to fit on a form. Bad weather, poor visibility, lost control, a terrible accident. People repeated those words because they were easier than questions. Nora tried to repeat them too. Some nights, when the diner was closed and the desert wind pushed dust against the glass, she would stand by the register and look at the photograph of her parents beside the little brass bell. Her father, Martin Bennett, had a hand on the shoulder of her mother, Elsie, while she held up a peach pie like it was a trophy. Both of them were younger in that picture, smiling beneath the same neon sign Nora now fought to keep lit. She could still hear her mother laughing. That was the part that made the place hard to leave. By mid-afternoon, the lunch rush had thinned to 3 tables, and a man at the counter finishing coffee he had stopped tasting 15 minutes earlier. Nora wiped down the pie case, then counted the remaining slices and wrote the number on a small pad beside the register. Her hand paused when a pickup slowed outside, tires crunching over gravel. It did not stop. She exhaled before she realized she had been holding her breath. Late light slid across the floor in long, dusty bars. Walt's booth sat empty now, the napkin folded beside his plate the way he always left it. The coffee machine gave one last tired hiss, and Nora turned the burner down. That was when she saw the envelope. It had been pushed beneath the front door while she was in the kitchen, lying half inside the diner and half against the threshold. Plain white paper. No stamp, no handwriting except her name typed neatly across the front. Nora looked through the window first. The parking lot was empty except for her old sedan and a tumble of dust moving past the gas pumps across the road. She bent down, picked up the envelope, and felt the stiff weight of documents inside. Her fingers tightened before she opened it. The first page carried Redstone Transit Group's letterhead. The second held a purchase agreement. Across the top, in black capital letters, were two words: Final Offer. The envelope stayed beside the register all night. Nora Bennett never opened it again after reading the words Final Offer the first time. She left it face down near the coffee machine while the neon sign outside flickered weakly against the desert dark. And every time she passed the counter, her eyes still drifted toward it anyway. By morning, the diner smelled like bacon grease, cinnamon, and old coffee. Copper Lantern filled quickly that day. 3 truckers came in before 8. A road crew from outside Tonopah took the back booths near the windows. Around noon, nearly every stool at the counter was occupied by somebody eating quietly beneath the soft rattle of silverware and the distant hum of highway traffic outside. Nora moved constantly, refilling coffee, carrying plates, cutting fresh peach pie behind the counter while steam fogged the glass display for a few seconds at a time. The lunch rush usually helped her stop thinking. Not today. The envelope still sat beneath the register. Around 12:40, the diner door opened. Nobody looked up right away. 3 men stepped inside wearing work jackets with the Redstone Transit Group logo stitched near the chest. Dust followed them across the tile floor while warm desert wind drifted briefly through the doorway before it closed behind them. Conversation lowered without fully stopping. One of the truckers near the window quietly set down his fork. The men moved slowly through the diner, like they already belonged there. The tallest one approached the counter first, mid-40s, sunburned neck, expensive watch beneath a blue work cuff that had probably never seen actual labor in its life. He smiled at Nora. "You read the offer?" Nora kept wiping down the counter. "I'm working." "That wasn't my question." The man rested both palms on the pie case and glanced around the diner before speaking louder. "Truth is, we're trying to help you out here." Nobody answered him. A waitress bell dinged softly near the kitchen pass-through after Nora brushed against it with her hip. Somewhere near the back booth, a coffee cup clicked faintly against ceramic as somebody set it down too carefully. The man looked at the framed photograph hanging behind the register. Martin and Elsie Bennett smiled back at him beneath the old Copper Lantern sign from nearly 20 years earlier. He tilted his head slightly. "Your folks should've sold when they had the chance." Nora's hand stopped moving. The diner went quieter. The second man stepped closer to the pie display and peered through the glass. "Still making that peach pie?" he asked. "My old man used to drive 40 miles for this stuff." "Then maybe you should show a little respect," Nora said. The first man laughed once through his nose. "Respect doesn't keep businesses alive anymore." He reached over the counter before Nora could react and grabbed the edge of the warm pie tray beside her. Then he flipped it onto the floor. The metal pan crashed against the tile hard enough to make several customers jump. Warm peaches and crusts scattered across the diner, while cinnamon and sugar filled the air with a sweetness that suddenly felt sickening. Nobody moved. A rancher near the back booth lowered his eyes toward his plate. One of the truck drivers slowly wiped gravy from his beard with a napkin without looking up. A woman beside the window stared so hard at her coffee cup it looked painful. Nora stepped around the broken pie tray. "Get out!" The third man moved fast. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her hard against the counter. "Careful," he said quietly. "You don't have many options left." Nora tried pulling away. The man tightened his grip. The diner stayed silent except for the buzzing neon sign outside and the low hum of refrigerated coolers behind the kitchen wall. Nora could feel every pair of eyes avoiding hers. That hurt worse than the grip around her wrist. Then came the sound of a truck engine outside. Heavy, close. Gravel cracked beneath tires in the parking lot. The man holding Nora barely glanced toward the windows. Looks like lunch delivery. But somebody else in the diner had already gone pale. An older customer near the front entrance slowly straightened in his seat, eyes fixed through the glass. The engine shut off. Silence settled across the diner for one long second. Then came the bark, deep enough to vibrate through the windows. The man gripping Nora's wrist flinched instinctively before he caught himself. Another bark exploded outside. Closer this time. Heads turned toward the parking lot. A dark pickup truck sat beneath the faded neon lantern sign with dust still rolling around its tires. The driver stepped out slowly, tall and broad-shouldered beneath a faded navy jacket worn pale at the seams. A black and tan German shepherd jumped down beside him, ears forward, muscles tight beneath its coat as it stared directly toward the diner windows. The older customer near the entrance whispered first, "Jesus, Cal Vance." The name traveled quietly across the room. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough. Cal pushed open the diner door. Heat followed him inside along with the smell of dust, diesel, and dry highway wind. His face looked older than Nora remembered, roughened by years beneath foreign suns and too little sleep. A short beard shadowed his jaw, and faint pale scars disappeared beneath the collar of his shirt. The dog stayed beside him without a leash. Every person inside noticed that immediately. Cal's eyes moved once across the diner, the broken pie tray, peaches across the floor, the man holding Nora's wrist. Nothing changed in his expression. That somehow made the room feel tighter. The man at the counter gave a crooked smile. "You picked a bedtime to visit family." Cal looked at Nora first. "You okay?" Nora nodded once, even though her wrist hurt. The man tightened his grip again. "Family conversation. Stay out of it." Rook growled instantly. Low, sharp, violent enough to freeze the room. The German shepherd moved forward half a step, body rigid, eyes locked on the man's arm. The sound coming from the dog no longer sounded like barking. It sounded closer to warning somebody before something irreversible happened. The man tried laughing through it. "Control your dog." Cal's voice stayed calm. "Take your hand off my sister." Nobody in the diner moved. The man hesitated. Then he shoved Nora backward instead. Rook exploded forward. The bark slammed through the diner so suddenly that one of the counter stools tipped sideways onto the tile. A coffee mug shattered near the grill, while the German shepherd snapped its jaws inches from the man's wrist with a crack loud enough to stop every breath in the room. The man stumbled backward hard into a booth. Cal never raised his voice, last warning. For a second, nobody spoke. The leader glanced around the diner and realized too many people were watching now. Not helping, still afraid, but watching. That mattered. He adjusted his jacket slowly and backed toward the door. "This place is done," he said to Nora. "Question is whether you want to go down with it." Then he looked at Cal. "You won't be staying long enough to matter." The men walked out together. Their truck pulled away fast enough to throw gravel against the diner windows before disappearing back onto Highway 50. Silence stayed behind them. A few customers quietly returned to their food. Others stood too quickly and left cash on tables without finishing lunch. One man avoided looking at Nora as he walked out the door, shame sitting visibly across his face. Rook finally stopped growling when Cal rested a hand against the back of his neck. Nora bent down slowly and picked up a piece of broken pie crust from the floor. Her hands shook. That night, after the diner closed and the last lights were turned low, she sat alone at the counter while Cal fixed the fallen stool near the pie case. Outside, truck headlights moved silently through the dark beyond the windows. Nora stared at the old family photograph behind the register. "If Mom and Dad were still here," she said quietly, "they wouldn't sell this place either." Cal looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Neither of them spoke after that. Cal Vance planned to stay 3 days. That was what he told Nora the morning after the fight inside the diner. 3 days to help her settle things down, make sure the Redstone men understood the message, and then he would head back toward Virginia before his leave expired. He said it while tightening loose bolts beneath the front counter with one of Martin Bennett's old socket wrenches resting beside his knee. 3 days sounded reasonable. By the end of the week, he was still there. The rhythm of the diner began adjusting around him slowly, the same way people grow used to a storm lamp glowing in the corner after enough dark nights. Cal repaired the broken stool from the confrontation, and fixed the loose hinge on the kitchen door that had squealed for nearly 2 years. One afternoon, he climbed a ladder beside the highway and rewired part of the flickering neon lantern sign while dry Nevada wind shoved dust against his jacket hard enough to rock the metal frame beneath him. Below, Rook watched the road, always watching. The German Shepherd settled naturally into the diner as if he had already decided it belonged to him. Older truckers scratched behind his ears while drinking coffee before sunrise, and Rook accepted the attention without wagging much, calm and disciplined beneath the counter stools. Most people noticed the same thing after a while. The dog never truly relaxed, neither did Cal. Business improved slightly once word spread that Nora's brother had returned. A few truckers who had stopped coming back drifted in again during breakfast hours, usually pretending they had never left at all. Nobody mentioned Redstone directly, but Nora caught certain looks now and then when customers noticed Cal near the grill or saw Rook sleeping beside the register. People felt safer. That alone seemed to irritate somebody. One Thursday morning, Nora unlocked the diner and found the power dead. The coffee machine sat silent behind the counter while the refrigerators hummed themselves warm in the dark. Outside, the neighboring gas station still had lights, and the hardware store across the road had power too. Cal stepped outside, followed the electrical line toward the rear utility box, and found the lock hanging open beside a severed cable. Clean cut, no animal had done that. Nora crossed her arms against the cold desert wind. "You think it was them?" Cal studied the wire for a long second before answering. "I think somebody wanted the diner closed today." He fixed it himself before lunch. 2 nights later, somebody shattered the side window near the pie display with a rock wrapped in newspaper. Nothing was stolen. The broken glass scattered across the floor beside the old family photograph, and Nora spent nearly an hour picking tiny shards from beneath the booth cushions, while Rook paced slowly beside the entrance with his ears forward. The sheriff arrived after midnight. Dale Mertzer looked tired before he even stepped out of his cruiser. Mid-50s, heavy coat, permanent lines beneath his eyes that made him seem older whenever the town got quiet enough to hear its own problems. He removed his hat inside the diner. "You got cameras?" Nora shook her head. "Anybody see anything?" Sheriff Murph crouched beside the broken window and sighed softly through his nose. "I'll file the report." Cal leaned against the counter nearby, arms folded. "You planning on doing anything besides paperwork?" The sheriff looked at him carefully. "You've been back less than a week, Cal. And this town's hanging by a thread already." The words stayed in the diner after he said them. Outside, truck headlights swept silently across the highway while wind rattled the loose edge of the neon sign above the roofline. Sheriff Mercer lowered his voice. "Redstone brings jobs. Half this county's praying that project goes through. That's supposed to excuse this?" "No," the sheriff said quietly, "but people get scared when money starts drying up." He left a few minutes later without promising much else. Nora watched his cruiser disappear down Highway 50 until the taillights vanished into darkness. "He used to come here every Sunday with his wife," she said. "Mom always packed extra pie for them to take home." Cal didn't answer immediately. "He's not dirty," Nora added. "Just tired." That sounded worse somehow. A few days later, Nora finally brought out the storage boxes from her father's office. They sat together after closing time near the back booth, while rain tapped lightly against the diner windows. Rook lay beneath the table with his head resting across his paws, though his ears twitched every time thunder rolled somewhere beyond the desert hills. Inside the boxes were land documents, invoices, old receipts, faded maps, and a small black USB drive held together with cracked tape. Martin Bennett had kept everything. Nora spread papers across the table while Cal flipped through them carefully beneath the yellow diner lights. "He never threw anything away," she said. "Most men his age didn't." Nora handed him a small spiral notebook filled with her father's handwriting. Fuel costs, supply numbers, maintenance reminders, half-finished thoughts scribbled into margins beside grocery lists. One line near the middle caught Cal's attention. "Check truck brakes again before Reno trip." He looked up. "Dad usually drove the pickup, almost always. You know if he had problems with it before the accident?" Nora hesitated. "Not really." Then her expression shifted slightly. "There was somebody The next afternoon, they drove out to a repair garage near the edge of town. The building smelled like motor oil, hot metal, and old cigarettes baked into concrete walls after 40 years of Nevada summers. A mechanic named Benny Ruiz remembered Martin Bennett immediately. "Hell," Benny said softly. "Your dad still owes you $20. Nora smiled faintly for the first time all day. Then Benny wiped grease from his hands and frowned toward the garage floor. "He brought the pickup in before that Reno trip. Said the brake pedal felt wrong." Cal looked up sharply. "Wrong how?" "Soft, I think." Benny shrugged once. "Couldn't find much at the time. You told him it was safe?" Benny stared toward the open garage door where highway dust drifted through pale afternoon light. "I told him to keep an eye on it." The silence afterward lasted too long. That evening, Cal drove alone to the junkyard outside Ely, where the wrecked Bennett pickup still sat beneath a tarp near the back fence. Rainwater streaked rust down the crushed hood, while broken glass glittered faintly beneath the fading light. Rook jumped from the truck first. The German Shepherd moved slowly around the wreckage, nose low near the metal frame. Then suddenly the dog stopped beside the driver's side wheel well. Stillness locked through his body. Cal watched carefully. Rook sniffed once more before giving a low growl deep in his throat. Not anger, recognition. Cal crouched beside the damaged wheel assembly. Beneath the rust and old rain smell, something chemical still lingered faintly against the metal. His jaw tightened. Back at the diner later that night, he dug an old phone from his duffel bag and stepped outside beneath the buzzing neon sign. The desert air carried the smell of distant rain and diesel drifting from the highway. The man who answered picked up on the second ring. "Walker." Cal leaned against the wall beside the diner window. "Need a favor. Thought you were on leave." "I am." A pause. "That bad?" Cal looked through the diner glass where Nora sat alone at the counter, sorting old paperwork beneath dim yellow light. Rook rested beside her chair without moving. "I don't know yet." Another silence settled between them. Then Cal said quietly, "But something about this doesn't fit." 3 nights later, the diner delivery truck was found with 2 slashed tires behind the building. Cal heard the sound before Nora did. A pickup rolled slowly into the parking lot just after closing, while desert wind shoved empty wrappers across the pavement hard enough to scrape against concrete. 2 men stepped out near the damaged truck, laughing softly between themselves while one carried a tire iron loose at his side. Rook rose immediately beside the diner door. Cal walked outside first. The men stopped smiling when they saw him. "This private property," one of them muttered. "Then you should leave." The second man lifted the tire iron slightly. "You don't own this place." Rook growled low enough to vibrate through the wind. The man stepped backward instinctively. Then the first one swung. Cal moved before the tire iron fully came around. One sharp movement. A hard impact. The man hit the side of the pickup breathless, while the weapon clattered across the pavement beside him. The second man tried stepping forward before Rook lunged low with a violent bark that trapped him instantly against the truck door. No bite. Just pressure. Enough. The wind howled across the empty highway parking lot while both men froze beneath the dog's growl. Cal stared at them for one long second. "Get out." They did. Later that night, Nora finally managed to restore one of the old voicemails from her father's damaged phone backup. Static crackled softly through the diner speakers, while she and Cal stood behind the counter listening in silence. Martin Bennett's tired voice filled the empty diner. "If this thing goes farther than I think it will." The recording cut off. Nothing followed except static. The voicemail played 3 more times before either of them spoke. Static crackled softly through the diner speakers while rain slid down the windows in crooked silver lines outside. Martin Bennett's voice still sounded tired on the recording, roughened by highway miles and too much coffee. But there had been something else there too. Something tight beneath the words. Fear. Cal shut the recording off. The silence afterward stretched across the diner, while the neon lantern outside buzzed weakly against the storm. Rook lifted his head from beneath the counter but stayed still, watching both of them without moving. Nora rubbed her hands together slowly. "Dad never scared easy." Cal nodded once. That part bothered him most. The next few days pulled the town tighter. Word about the confrontation at Copper Lantern had spread farther than Nora realized. Some locals quietly supported her now, but others had started looking at the diner differently whenever Redstone's highway project came up in conversation. The county needed jobs. Everybody knew that. Empty storefronts lined parts of downtown Ely already, and half the younger families were leaving for Reno or Salt Lake before their kids finished high school. People wanted something to save the town. Redstone knew it. A legal notice arrived Tuesday morning. Nora unfolded it beside the coffee machine while breakfast customers pretended not to watch. Redstone's attorneys claimed Copper Lantern sat inside a disputed commercial access zone connected to the proposed logistics expansion. Until the matter was resolved, the diner could face temporary operational restrictions under county review. Operational restrictions, Nora repeated quietly. That's a fancy way to kill a business. Cal took the paper from her hand. The lawyer's name sat neatly beneath the signature line. Evan Grady, Regional Counsel for Redstone Transit Group. Another name appeared deeper in the filing. Mitchell Kane, Regional Operations Manager. Cal recognized it immediately from one of Martin Bennett's old notebooks. Kane keeps pushing land deal. He folded the paper carefully instead of crushing it. That worried Nora more. By Thursday evening, the town community center was full. Metal chairs scraped across the floor beneath fluorescent lights while local business owners, ranchers, county workers, and truck drivers packed themselves shoulder to shoulder inside the overheated room. Redstone representatives stood near the front with polished shoes and prepared binders, while Sheriff Mercer remained near the back wall beside two deputies who looked uncomfortable being there at all. Nora sat beside Cal in the third row. Rook stayed beneath her chair. The German Shepherd's ears moved constantly beneath the noise. Mitch Kane finally stepped forward around 7. He looked clean in the way certain men always did. Trim haircut, crisp collar, calm smile practiced in hotel mirrors before meetings like this. He spoke about economic growth, infrastructure investment, regional opportunity, and long-term sustainability while charts glowed behind him on a projection screen near the stage. Then he mentioned Copper Lantern. The unfortunate reality, Kane said smoothly, is that some older properties sit directly in the path of necessary development. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Nora stood before Cal could stop her. That diner belongs to my family. Every head turned. Kane kept smiling. Miss Bennett, nobody's disputing ownership. You've been trying to force us out for over a year. Murmurs spread quietly through the room. Kane clasped his hands together. Redstone made generous offers your parents declined repeatedly. The room went still. Cal saw Nora's shoulders tighten immediately. Kane realized it too late. A voice near the back interrupted him. Your people threatened Martin Bennett before he died. An older truck driver stood slowly from his chair near the wall. Nora recognized him instantly. Leon Baxter. He used to stop at Copper Lantern twice a week for pie and black coffee before his overnight freight runs toward Reno. Another man stood beside him. Then another. One rancher removed his cap before speaking. I heard your boys corner him behind the gas station last spring. The room shifted uneasily now, not loud, just changing. Sheriff Mercer looked toward Kane carefully for the first time all night. Kane's polished smile weakened slightly. Those are serious accusations. Maybe, Leon Baxter said, but folks around here remember things. The meeting dissolved soon after. Nobody shouted. Nobody flipped tables. But the silence leaving the room felt different than the silence entering it. Outside, wind rolled dust through the parking lot, while people avoided speaking too loudly beneath the streetlights. Nora stood beside Cal near the truck. You heard him, she said quietly. Dad turned them down more than once. Cal stared toward the highway. Yeah, you think that's why. I don't know yet. But he was starting to. That thought followed him everywhere afterward. It sat beside him while he repaired shelving in the diner storage room. It stayed with him during early mornings while he poured coffee before sunrise and watched truck headlights move through desert darkness beyond the windows. Some nights he woke in the booth near the office because he thought he heard his phone ringing overseas again. If he had come home sooner, if he had answered more calls, if he had paid closer attention. Guilt worked slowly, like rust. Walker arrived Saturday afternoon. His federal credentials stayed hidden inside his jacket pocket, but Cal still noticed how carefully he the diner windows, the parking lot, and the highway before stepping inside. He was broader than Cal remembered, grayer around the temples now, with the same steady eyes he used to carry during deployment briefings overseas. Nora poured him coffee. Walker listened quietly while Cal explained everything they had found so far. The brake concerns, the voicemail, the pressure campaign, Mitchell Kane's name appearing repeatedly through Martin Bennett's papers. Walker rubbed a thumb along the edge of his mug. You may have enough to trigger a formal review, May. You're still missing proof. The lights flickered overhead suddenly. Then the diner went dark. The refrigerators died first. After that came silence, complete silence. Outside, wind hammered dust against the windows hard enough to sound like rain. Cal moved immediately. Rook was already at the door. The dog growled low while Cal grabbed a flashlight from beneath the counter and stepped into the darkness behind the diner. Wind tore across the alley beside the building, carrying the sharp smell of gasoline somewhere nearby. Walker followed him outside. The storage shed behind Copper Lantern stood partially open. Cal saw movement inside. Then firelight. Move, he snapped. They reached the shed just as one of the men inside knocked over a metal fuel can beside stacked document boxes. Flames crawled instantly across spilled gasoline, orange light flashing violently against the walls while smoke rolled upward toward the rafters. Rook lunged first. A man near the doorway tried running past the dog and slammed backward against shelving when the German Shepherd exploded forward with a bark violent enough to freeze him in place. Another swung a crowbar toward Cal's head. Cal caught the arm halfway through the motion. One hard impact drove the man against the wall. The crowbar hit concrete. Smoke thickened rapidly around them while flames spread across the floor toward old storage boxes filled with Martin Bennett's records. Walker dragged 2 boxes clear. Rook cornered the first man against a workbench, without biting teeth flashing inches from the man's face while deep growls rattled through the burning shed. Then Cal saw who the second man was, the same one who had grabbed Nora inside the diner. Blood ran from the corner of the man's mouth while Cal pinned him hard against the wall. You should stayed gone, the man spat. Cal tightened his grip. For one dangerous second, the room narrowed around him. Fire roared somewhere behind his shoulder while years of deployment anger moved through his chest like something waking up again. Then he heard Rook bark once. Sharp, controlled. Cal released the man before the moment crossed somewhere it could not return from. Schmercer's cruisers arrived minutes later alongside county fire crews. Smoke drifted across the highway while deputies pulled half-burned boxes from the shed beneath flashing lights. Walker crouched near the evidence pile beside a melted fuel can and a damaged body camera recovered from one of the attackers. He looked up at Cal. This is enough. The fire hissed softly behind them while dawn-colored smoke rolled into the Nevada sky. Walker stood. I'm calling federal transportation investigators tonight. Federal investigators reached Ely before sunrise on a Monday. Most people noticed the government SUVs parked outside the county offices before they heard anything official. By lunchtime, somebody had already told the gas station cashier that Redstone Transit Group was being investigated for intimidation, falsified reports, and illegal pressure tied to land purchases along Highway 50. Truck drivers carried the story east and west before the local newspaper ever printed a word about it. The town spent the next few weeks pretending not to stare. But people did, especially when Mitchell Kane's name started appearing on television reports out of Reno. Copper Lantern stayed busy through most of December after that. Not crowded every hour. Some mornings still felt slow enough for Nora to hear the heater clicking behind the pie counter, while snow slid off the diner roof outside. But the empty stretches between customers grew shorter now, and the old lunch crowd slowly found its way back to the booths near the windows. One morning, Leon Baxter walked in carrying chains over his shoulder from his freight rig parked outside. You still got peach pie? Nora looked up from the coffee machine. You asking for yourself or the whole truck stop? Leon grinned faintly. Depends how fresh it is. That afternoon, Nora baked 2 extra pies for the first time in nearly a year. The diner began sounding like itself again after that. Coffee cups knocking softly against saucers, the low scrape of boots across tile, a couple arguing gently over whether Nevada winters were getting colder or they were just getting old. Somebody laughing near the counter while Rook lifted his head briefly from beneath the register before deciding the noise wasn't worth investigating. Small things returned first. The bigger ones took longer. Sheriff Dale Mercer started stopping by every few days once the federal investigation became public. Sometimes he stayed long enough to eat. Sometimes he only drank coffee near the end of the counter while watching snow move sideways across the highway through the windows. One evening, after closing, he placed a worn notebook beside Nora's register. Smoke stains darkened the edges. "We found it in county storage," he said quietly. Nora recognized it immediately. Her father's handwriting covered the front in faded black marker, fuel logs, property notes. She opened the notebook carefully, while Cal stood nearby replacing bulbs inside the old neon lantern sign wiring. Inside were copies of complaints Martin Bennett had filed months before the crash. Notes about pressure from Redstone employees, dates, license plate numbers, mentions of meetings near Reno connected to the highway expansion deal. One line had been underlined twice. Truck felt wrong again after service. Nora stopped reading for a moment. Sheriff Mercer rested both hands against the counter. Those reports should have been processed. Cal looked over from the ladder, but they weren't. The sheriff nodded once. No excuses this time. Outside, a freight truck rolled slowly past the diner while snow swirled through its headlights across the dark highway shoulder. "I kept telling myself the town needed the project," Sheriff Mercer said. "Jobs, money, something stable." Nobody answered him immediately. The coffee machine hissed softly behind the counter. Finally, Nora closed the notebook. "My dad believed this place mattered too." The sheriff lowered his eyes after that. Federal investigators eventually confirmed enough evidence to move publicly against Redstone's regional operations. Several land disputes tied to intimidation tactics reopened across eastern Nevada, and transportation officials began reviewing maintenance records connected to commercial vehicles involved in earlier complaints. Nobody in town said much when Mitchell Kane disappeared from the news a few weeks later. People simply stopped defending him. That winter settled hard over Ely. Snow gathered along the edges of Highway 50, while cold wind rattled the diner windows after sunset. Cal spent most mornings fixing things around copper lantern that Martin Bennett had probably meant to repair years earlier. He rebuilt shelves damaged during the fire, repaired 2 loose counter stools, and repainted the faded trim around the diner entrance while Rook watched passing traffic from the parking lot beside him. Some nights Cal still slept lightly. Old habits stayed buried deep. A drop pan in the kitchen could pull him awake before he understood where he was. Once, Nora found him sitting alone near the darkened windows at 3 in the morning with a cup of untouched coffee cooling between his hands while snow drifted across the empty road outside. "You all right?" she asked quietly. Cal looked toward the highway for a few seconds before answering. Getting there, that was enough. The decision came near Christmas. A letter from Virginia arrived folded inside a plain government envelope. Nora found it sitting unopened beside Cal's plate during breakfast rush, while truckers crowded the counter complaining about icy roads west of Tonopah. "You gonna open that?" she asked. Cal kept pouring coffee into a customer's mug. "Already know what it says." And he wiped his hands on a dish towel slowly before sitting down across from her. "For years, I thought I was supposed to keep moving," he said. "Every deployment felt temporary. Every place did." The diner door opened behind them, bringing cold air and the smell of diesel inside, with 2 ranchers stamping snow from their boots near the entrance. Cal glanced toward the sound before continuing. "I don't think I want to leave this place anymore." Nora studied him quietly across the counter. The words seemed to settle into the diner itself somehow, mixing with the coffee smell and heater noise, and the soft clatter of dishes coming from the kitchen sink. Rook rested his head across Cal's boot. That afternoon, Cal mailed the retirement paperwork. No speeches, no dramatic moment. Just a stamped envelope disappearing across a worn post office counter while sleet tapped against the windows outside. A week later, Nora climbed onto the front counter with a screwdriver while Cal stood below her, holding the repaired family photograph wrapped carefully in brown paper. The old frame had new glass now, though one corner still carried a scratch from years earlier that neither of them bothered fixing. "Little higher," Nora said. Cal adjusted the frame. There, perfect. Martin and Elsie Bennett smiled down from the wall again beside the register where customers had looked up at them for decades while waiting on pie and coffee. Rook circled twice beneath the counter before lying down with a heavy sigh. The diner stayed open late that night. Snow moved softly through the neon glow outside while truck headlights drifted along Highway 50 beyond the windows. Near midnight, the last customers finally left, carrying pie boxes tucked beneath their arms against the cold. Nora wiped down the counter slowly. Cal stacked chairs onto empty booths near the back wall while the coffee machine clicked softly through another heating cycle behind him. Somewhere near the kitchen, old pipes knocked once inside the walls before settling quiet again. Ordinary sounds, the kind most people forget after a while. But Cal noticed all of them. Outside, the copper lantern sign hummed steadily against the winter dark, without flickering once. And for the first time since returning to Nevada, Cal Vance no longer felt like a man passing through someone else's life. I keep thinking about the sound the diner made after everyone finally went home. The coffee machine clicking off near midnight, snow brushing softly against the windows out by Highway 50. Somebody's boot prints melting slowly near the front door while the neon lantern kept humming outside like it had decided it wasn't ready to give up yet. I think a lot of people understand places like that better as they get older. A small family business. An old photograph behind a counter. A recipe written in somebody's handwriting after they're gone. Things that probably don't look important to the rest of the world, but somehow end up holding entire pieces of our lives inside them. What stayed with me most about this story wasn't the fight or the investigation. It was watching people slowly come back through those diner doors again. One truck at a time. One cup of coffee at a time. Sometimes healing looks more ordinary than we expect. Maybe that's part of grace too. If this story reminded you of a place, a person, or even a memory you haven't thought about in a while, I'd really love to hear about it in the comments. And if you enjoy grounded stories about family, loyalty, canines, and people trying to find their way home again, you're always welcome here. Feel free to like and subscribe if you'd like to stay for more stories like this. This story is fictional, but the loneliness, pressure, kindness, and quiet resilience inside it come from very real things people carry every day, especially in small towns that the world moves past too quickly. Tonight, somewhere out along an empty American highway, there's probably still a diner with one light glowing in the dark while somebody inside waits for the next truck to pull in.